the relationship of the teacher and student, the relationship of the guru and disciple is rare and beautiful, and deeply profound, deeply mysterious in its nature. But it has to be understood that it is a vessel, and both the teacher and the student are responsible for the operation and sound upkeep of the vessel, so that vessel stays seaworthy as it crosses the ocean, crosses the great ocean and accomplishes the great work, that of illumination, that of enlightenment. It's an extremely intense relationship, and there are clear components that are like the superstructure of a complex architecture. That play out again and again on countless levels. But they should be understood that they play out in all the levels I've just defined. The idea of the stream of imputed terms, which are objective terms of the creation. The subject is the wheel of civic existence, the dynamics of the interdependent origin. That on one hand is the vessel of bondage, as it moves in its cyclic order, but as it moves in its reverse order, it produces the dynamic of cessation, the process of unwinding the elements of interdependent cause, bringing them to cessation and stopping, which gives rise to the possibility of emptiness. And with the possibility of emptiness, we have the capacity to see the truth, to see the true underlying inner nature. So in that way, it's very much like a fast game of tennis or even ping pong. Call response. In lots of ways, the teacher is just serving them up and waiting for you to hit one back. It's just like, you assess the person you play, you're playing them baseball, you're playing them in tennis, and you start with your fastest ball, and it goes right by them. They didn't even see it, they didn't move. And you try off angles, didn't see it, didn't move. Okay, shoot one right at them, boom. Hits them right in the head. At least they felt that one. And so a lot of times that's the teacher, waiting to get one hit back to him. And this is an idea it's a principle of recognition. The teacher recognizes the student. In all your cases, you're seen before you even walk through the door. And actually one of the first spiritual tests is, how long does it take you to walk through the door? Because oftentimes you'll find yourself in contact with the teacher. It's tricky at first because you haven't maybe seen them physically. and you've maybe just begun to even consider the concept of spiritual training. See, spiritual training is a funny thing because it can be decided upon by imputed terms, by dependent terms. In other words, it's your mind. You know, I really should try to get to know my mind, try to get a hold of my mind, learn a little something about myself. Maybe I should meditate. Maybe I should practice Tai Chi. Maybe I should do Hatha Yoga. You start that process, and you kind of go through a logical series of dependent terms. In other words, you start working on yourself. But there's another order of awareness where it's like you've already gone through that maybe in 1, 10, or 100, or maybe even 1,000 lifetimes. And that's distilled to a level where it needs to go to the furthest level. And the soul will say, okay, we need to go to the furthest level. And the soul will make the decision to drag your life into the path of the Guru, lead you into situations where the soul rules the situation. In all of your cases, you're a combination of both. But predominantly speaking, it's a soul decision that you're sitting here. I happen to know that because I know a lot of you go through the argument mentally for reasons to get away, but somehow you just can't. Because the soul won't let you. But this idea of recognition is the idea of prostration. We see it, and then formally in the center, we always start the session where the teacher formally recognizes the student. And it's a form of prostration. The teacher is the servant of the student. The situation has to start where you are. And in all cases, when the teacher goes like this, everybody returns and recognizes the teacher. This is a very powerful spiritual event. It happens again on two levels. It happens on the relative level, the formality of the court, but it also is speaking to something very deep within the soul. There is the idea of offering, being recognized as a student. And one of the things that I like to do is when a person wants to be a student and enter the center, I like to have them fill out a questionnaire. I don't think they used questionnaires in the old days. But because of the way the world operates now, there's a kind of theater to it. And I've got 4 or 5 questions on there, the answers of which always interest me. I'm going to get you a questionnaire. Let's see, how many people here have become students and not yet filled out a questionnaire? Okay. I had this discussion with Lee a few days ago. But it goes to the recognition of the student and the teacher. And the questionnaire is actually quite humorous. The underlying question is, can you take a joke? That's very important.
Do we want to see through the joke?
In this exchange is the idea of offering, because becoming a student is a reality. The guru, when your request to become a student, takes the request very seriously. And it becomes a dynamic of offering, of time, attention, energy, acknowledgement and recognition of the student. And the idea of the offering in return is the acknowledgement of the significance, the acknowledgement of the existence of the teacher and the significance of the relationship. And it is served by one's attention and respect to the teacher and to the activity and to the curriculum. As I said a few minutes ago, the tempo in Hard Light it's an up-tempo curriculum by any standard. Aggressive and demanding. And one of the things that it's designed to do is to begin to awaken and illuminate, begin to unwind the samskaras that are binding the person to the wheel of cyclic existence. And aggressively and actively illuminating their relative bodies. One of the main bodies of activity are the subtle body. By beginning to treat the subtle body, which oftentimes when the teacher first meets the student is kind of in a compromised condition. There are parts of it that are very clogged up from accumulated klesha-born proliferating obscuration, karma, cause and effect. The person is oftentimes, has gone through various forms of affliction and the scar, leaving lots of scar tissue. So the first part of the process is basically start cleaning up, clearing all the detritus off of you, see where work is needed and at what level, starting the fundamental repair. Oftentimes, a person looks kind of like a broken down house, broken and overdrafty, the window's punched out, there's no inner heat source or very little, and so they're kind of on shaky ground, and you just shore everything up, shore up the foundation, shore up the house, seal up all the windows, fresh paint, start a fire in the fireplace, and there's the beginning of a kind of warmth, and that quality begins to the process of awakening, because then the vessel is complete. The expectation of the offering in return is the giving attention to the teacher and the teaching and the teacher's direction. If you're directed to meditate every day, meditate an hour every day, and it's important. You're expected to come to the weekly darshan, because that's an important session, day by day, session by session. Basically, what is going on as I look at you directly and personally, what's going on with you? And the light addresses that situation, and so your case is constantly being advanced. Come to as many of the intensives as you can. If you live in town, it's best to come to each one. If you live out of town, it's best to come to at least one every season. Every passing season of 3 months, you should come to at least one intensive, and everything will stay in very high up tempo in the meantime. Generate the practice and generate the process of daily offering, of paying attention to your own sadhana. This is spiritual progress, especially by the teacher, is regarded as an incredible miracle and is rejoiced over you. You have no idea. This is I'm speaking in general and in specific in terms of the student-teacher relationship. A major quality of, this is probably the most important quality to take place between the student and the teacher, is one of honesty. You have to get into the habit of being absolutely honest with yourself. As you know, anybody that's spent 10 minutes studying themselves, you know that there are all kinds of routines and subroutines and sub-agendas inside our psyche. And we've gotten used to, in the relationship, our relationship with the world, we have our face to the world, and we're intelligent people, so we know how to act and what the world wants from us, and we can clearly present it to us, and we can, and in that agenda, we can move through the world smoothly, and in many cases, get what we want out of the world. And this is, very much what we're about, and as we address the dynamics, the big issues of life. What are we going to be when we grow up? How are we going to make money? Who am I going to marry? Am I going to have children? Am I not going to marry? All those big questions. Those are all subroutines. Those are all routines and subroutines, and they're big issues that demand a lot of attention. And one thing that a lot of people get surprised with about this idea of honesty, this idea of offering, where when you form a relationship with a teacher, the teacher expects your attention, the teacher expects your respect, and that respect is shown by being responsive to the teachings. Taking the time within yourself, putting time in your life, for self-examination, for meditation. On top of all of the other things you still have to do, you still have to make money. You either make money in some form of service, or in some people have the talent to generate and form a career that has an advancing cause that you train for in depth and move along and keep that going. Family life, relationships, loved ones, children, yes or no, all have to be faced and dealt with. At the same time, you're expected to deal with the teacher. Now, once you get all of those basic questions covered, okay, you figured out what you want to do, what you're going to do, how you're going to make money, where you're going to live, how you're going to live, who you're going to live with. That's all settled. Then we have these dynamic subroutines of who we are, and we sometimes define ourselves by our careers, by our chosen companions, etc. That works as long as it goes, but once you meet the teacher, the first thing the teacher says is, no, you're not. It's great who you are. I see that you've worked on yourself, and I rejoice in that. And it shows that you have intelligence and discipline. You can follow a line of intent through all of its stages, which shows you have intelligence and willpower, and you know how to apply yourself. That's one of the first things the teacher assesses when they look at you, is like, can this person do it? If they want to do it, it's admirable. And then can they do it is the second question. And there's a clear assessment of skill and ability, and there's always this kind of an area of tryout. You watch and see how the student performs. How serious are they? What is their spiritual force? What is their force of will? What is their force of aspiration? What do they want? What are they interested in? Oftentimes you'll see that people understand that spiritual energy is a kind of power. And when it gets kind of in there's a subroutine in there that says, well, I want spiritual power so I can get what I want from the world. And that happens a lot, and I'm not against it. I'm happy that you get what you want from the world, as long as you don't make that your sole goal, and the idea of coming to know yourself truly for its own virtue, for its own reality, is also in there. It's also an interesting thing when a person uses spiritual power to fulfill desire. It's kind of, well, it's great. I like it a lot because it's a really good trap, and it eventually works out in the teacher's favor. But this is the idea of offering. What are you willing to do? What will you give? What will you give to the path? What will you give to the cause? This is the relationship. And believe me, the teacher really looks at it in that way. The idea of character. There is a general thesis that the spiritual life uplifts the character. In other words, a person that embraces the spiritual life has begun to understand the impact of the negative angels of the psyche, the poisons of greed, of jealousy, of hatred, of lust, of sloth, all of the all-time greatest hits of negative behavior, negative psyche, and a turning away of that. And the generation of increasing capacity for virtue, which doesn't just happen. It has to be made to happen. The first idea of virtue is one of selfless giving, of service, being of help to others. You're willing to give of yourself, give of your own energy, your own time, to be of service to others, to generate some good in the situation, so that every single action that you do in your life doesn't just come back to you or is all about you. It's one of those qualities, those spiritual qualities, when a person has the capacity to generate selfless service. It's a sign of real character. Because the person that does that and knows that has learned something very profound, that there is a genuine truth in the path of selfless service. Wherein when one's life is consecrated to the upliftment of others, one's own life is uplifted as well. The greater the number of beings that are uplifted, that there's a kind of webbing together and all ships rise. This is the profound message of the original soul, which he has on the front of his shrine, Mastery in Servitude. This is one of the dynamics that the teacher, that the Guru has come to understand. The Guru is the servant. And seeks to serve God in all forms. And it's not even a form necessarily like the Guru is like all wise or a really great being. It's just something that they've come to understand and see as truth. And that's one of the aspects of spiritual life, is you take the truth where you find it. Because there is a subroutine in human nature. It's called, at first when we start out, we start to pick and choose our truths selectively, kind of like cherry picking. And we want those truths to add and support our life and our subroutines. And it's actually, when you look into it, our ego is trying to get the truth to serve itself. But the truth is just the truth. It has an incredible force all its own, and nobody can control the truth. You can't summon the truth. You can't lie about the truth, because the truth will out. That's the nature of the truth. And this is the idea of honesty. this quality that you began, it starts with a love of truth. You just simply, you form a love of truth. And it takes whatever form it will, it'll be different and unique for each person, based on their background, based on their training, based on their predilections, and based on their nature. But no matter what, as the truth accumulates, it accumulates into a ever greater force in times one system. And at one point it'll generate a critical mass and it will change you. And in this case, we'll see a movement in character. From the standpoint of the teacher, it's not that difficult to, in the first stages of dealing with the student, generate the basic repairs, begin to empower them. In other words, increase the amount of kundalini in their being, and produce a vesicle that can contain more and more energy. It's technical and it's all important. But it's also kind of systematic. But what's so interesting is when that spiritual force, the kundalini, is of course the truth of the creation, and is one of the primary instruments of Shaktipan, of awakening, is when that empowerment generates and transmutes a being's character, and a person's character begins to become uplifted. And you'll see that the person begins to have the energy, the aspiration, and inspiration. They're enthusiastic and dynamic in their practice, showing up at every event, participating enthusiastically, practicing with intensity and enthusiasm in their home practice. And you also see a beginning of an eschewing of the lower qualities of jealousy and greed, etc. And the person begins to, as an act of will, begin to act from a condition of love, and not love in need of a return for love, which is a kind of love. But in the matters of spiritual love, we embrace love for its own sake, give rise to love for its own sake, and act from love in its own sake. That's why we practice the bodhicitta every day. It's one of the practices of hard light. First thing, come see the teacher. Second, practice an hour every day. In that hour a day, practice bodhicitta, give rise to love. A bit every day, and act from that space of love in your life, which begins to give you the next rank. Giving rise to love gives you the ability to act from generosity. Giving rise to love gives you the ability to act with kindness. Giving rise to love gives rise to patience. Giving rise to love gives rise to the power of inspiration and aspiration. When we act in that way in the world, it's reflected back at you. Yeah, just look at yourself. Look at the days. On the days that you're feeling, kind of churned and you're tumbling and you're just kind of going through the world and getting your work done. But then there are days when everything comes together. It's like a powerful influx of energy. Meditation was really strong this morning, and you have a very strong experience of love in your heart, and you go out the door with that banner. And everybody that you meet responds to you, because that's what everybody's looking for. And you find that when you're filled with love, you feel like you're full. You don't have to guard. You're not in a mentality of guarding what you have. Oh, that's good. I only have so much, and if I give it away or somebody takes it away, I'll have less. The idea of love is exactly the opposite. It is the essence of courage. It gives you the ability to face the unknown. It gives you the ability to drive through the obstacles that arise in all lives, in all existence. Both because in this life, in this kind of training system, you have to deal with both the temporal world, all the issues of your life, and you have to deal with a dynamic training program of the spirit. They are not separate. It's quite literally the Sufi way, where there is no separation between the world and God. Or like the first line of the Shiva Sutras, the bliss of the world is the bliss of samadhi. It's an awakened outlook. And it sometimes is rough because as you train spiritually, you become super sensitive, you become super psychic. You see people around you have so much problems, so much afflictions, there's so much suffering, and it's sometimes hard to see. But you can't turn away and you can't back away. Because even if you wanted to be separate, and it's a reasonable position, it'll never happen. The interconnection is absolute. At one point you see that, and you accept it, you recognize it as a truth, and then you stop running from it. And all of this is under the idea of honesty. Who are you? What are you doing? Where do you come from? What are you interested in? What do you want out of the situation? It's important that you know that. And one of the things that you're dealing with in your daily process of meditation, you're not just contemplating your belly button. You're examining yourself. You're seeing all of these subroutines that you have within you, and you see them within. It's just like, wait a minute, that's kind of an unusual agenda, and it's kind of tethered onto this thing, and it's connected to this thing over here. And what the hell's going on there? And you kind of investigate into it, and you find, of course, a psychological thread that leads back to wild sets of previous conditions, childhood conditions of this life, and even more complex visions in other lives. But the ability to perceive it liberates you from it. And to be liberated from it, you have to be able to recognize it. And to be able to recognize it, you have to be honest with it. You can't just say, ooh, that's nasty. I don't ever want to admit that that's inside me. And even though I'm acting from it in a subtle unconscious way or a subconscious way, because it's subconscious, it's not really there. That doesn't work because it's there. That's the very definition of a klesha-born and proliferating obscuration. That's how it operates. So what you're constantly addressing, one of the intense sides of honesty is you have to be honest with yourself. And as you run into some rough material inside yourself, you can't be utsy about it. You can't deny that its existence. You just get in there, you take it apart, you understand its mechanics, and the vitality of the honesty and perception of itself takes it apart, and it ceases to be an operative force. That is the bread and butter of spiritual life. I mean, there's no way around that. We've existed for a long time in countless situations. Just look at the world. The world is 9/10 dark, 1/10 bright. And you've been through this world more lifetimes. You will be alarmed to know how many lifetimes when that revelation takes place. And you've been a part of every kind of thing. And it's left its impressions inside you. And one of the things about it is you've got to unravel it, be clear with it, be honest with it. This is where you raise the honesty. What do you want? I want to be awakened. Why? Because I want to be liberated from the wheel. How? Seek out the Guru who has the power of Shaktipat. Gain the Shaktipat. And with the force of that Shaktipat, unwind and undermine all of that klesha-born proliferating obscuration and become free from the wheel. That's the plan. In being honest with yourself, You always want your relationship with the teacher to be one of absolute honesty. Be aware of who you are. Be the person you are. And in your presentation of yourself, you should understand that you're being read at the level of body, speech, and mind. And so there's a kind of acceptance to the intensity of that relationship. And the only thing that's going to survive that relationship is honesty. Which, in this way, honesty becomes one of the essential offerings in the relationship between the student and the teacher, and it flows in both directions.